4, 3.
We'll do it live!
Now we're live! Erin Kennedy. The general craziness of it, the impact on your life.
We have gone through so many stories and we said, you know what? This should not be kept to the two of us. Hi, Megan.
Erin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, you and I have both stepped into, in some ways, the business world.
We were pushed into the business world.
We were pushed into the business
step
world.
in.
Yes. While still using the skills that we learned in our old world of media, of communications. And I think both of us have seen where we can be helpful, but also we have seen where there are giant holes in communication, where somehow the ball is dropped. So I actually reached out to Walter Paulson. He is entrenched in the business world. We're going to let him tell you about himself just in a moment. But Walter is someone that we would love to understand more about where communication is missing in business, where people who used to be in the communication field can be useful, and where we can help.
So because we didn't know that. We thought we'd be selling our hair.
Yeah, or feed pictures or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, everybody, please welcome Walter. Walter, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Walter.
Nice to see you, Erin and Megan. And it's fun to hear your sort of familiar on-screen banter. Let's kick it from weather over to news, over to sports.
Yep. My job was always to give Megan the hardest weather tosses. Like, so Megan, snow in the forecast? And she'd have to be like, well, Erin, generally in July, that's not empirically possible.
Although one time, yeah, exactly. So we would challenge each other like that often. And I think that may be something that I miss a little bit, is being put on the spot on the air kind of a thing, because that is fun. But as we've been saying, you're put on the spot in the business world all the time. You've got to communicate well all the time. If you're leading a company, if you're working in a company, communication is also key. So Walter, you're part of Vistage. Can you let everybody know what that is, what you do, what you have done, just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So Vistage is the world's largest executive and peer coaching organization. It's been around for about 60 years. And the model's really simple. We take former CEOs and senior executives who have an interesting perspective. They've sat in the CEO chair, made the hard decisions. And we share that with people who are currently CEOs and senior executives. And we do this in both one-to-one coaching, but the heart of Vistage are these executive peer groups. So we get 16 CEOs together in a room once a month, and they talk about all their hardest issues. And it's an interesting thing, because being a CEO is a sexy title, but it's really kind of a hard and lonely job. For most CEOs, most of the time. Everybody wants something from them. They want a fee or a promotion or a contract. It's hard to know who to turn to and actually really be honest. And so that's what we provide. And the thing I also do executive leadership coaching and training. But the thing I particularly like about Vistage is I don't have to have all the answers. I can orchestrate the conversation and extract the collective wisdom of, many decades of senior executive experience. And it's interesting because we just really help CEOs feel heard, feel confident in their decisions. And a lot of times what will happen is, even if somebody's working on an issue that's not theirs, they'll help somebody else solve a problem or come up with an approach, and it'll help them with respect to a decision, going on at their own company. Mm-hmm. So that's what I do now. Before that, I'd been a senior executive and founder of multiple companies in Silicon Valley. The one, Megan, we talked about one of them. I built a gift card exchange kiosk that we launched there at Strachan Van Til and St. John.
Right in my hometown. I could probably walk there, Walter.
That's funny. And before that, I led the team that created the gift card mall. So if you've ever bought a gift card at a grocery store, that was an idea that we had. many years ago, and now it just seems like, well, of course you can get a gift card at the end cap. You
Oh,
don't have
thank
to-
goodness. So many birthday party gifts were
All the
saved by going to
birthdays.
Walgreens and getting a $10 Target card. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
So that was you, Walter.
exactly. So and that's, I mean, and I've worked on sort of more technical things, but that's a fun one because pretty much everybody knows about it. And who doesn't, I mean, it's convenient for the giver. You know, people like to get gift cards.
Sure.
It's a good thing. And before that, I'd worked in media and entertainment at 20th Century Fox. So I did film financings. I financed Speed and Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire, which were all super.
I've
fun.
heard of those movies.
A couple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
She probably, yes, probably, yes, you know, not on VHS, maybe a DVD, not a streaming, but yeah. So I have a background in media, and I'm delighted to be here and see if I can help.
Why did you leave media though?
Yeah.
So interesting thing. So had a really nice life. Was living in a rent control place in Santa Monica, 7 blocks from the beach, commuting to the Fox lot in Century City. So
That's
I
pretty
did
awesome.
not have a lot of complaints, but longer term, I guess there were 2 things. We wanted to have a family and thought that Northern California would be, you know, maybe a better place. And I had gotten interested in technology, and it just seemed like, oh, there's going to be some really cool stuff happening. I should go figure out how to be a part of this. And so my bridge was I did a corporate venture job for NEC, a big Japanese technology conglomerate. I'd done a lot of work in and with Japanese companies, and then I started working at startups.
So I guess my question, in your role now,
Mhm.
as an advisor, as somebody who gets that group of people together and they can all work together to find answers, as you mentioned, how often is communication or lack thereof discussed? Is this something that's a problem for typically a lot of these CEOs, or they're people that are working for them?
It comes up multiple times every meeting. It's like not only what's the decision, which is hard enough, how do you communicate it? How's it going to land? Are you communicating to your employees? Communicating to customers? What's the right channel? Now, a huge thing is companies are trying to manage diverse remote workforces. How do you lead a workforce that is fully remote or comes in twice a week and keep them, engaged and part of a team? A lot of that comes down to what are the, how do you communicate? And it's, I think it's good communication skills are more important than ever.
Mhm.
So what are the solutions that you've come upon for that?
Oh, it's, I guess, communicating well is like, writing well. It's something that it takes, sort of not long to learn, but a lifetime to perfect. And I think it really depends on the audience. And there's not a one size fits all. So I'll give you an example. There was a company I was working with that had raised a bunch of money, but very successful at raising money. And then they launched a couple of products that hadn't worked. And so they were really feeling under pressure. And I was working with their management team on leadership and communications. And the CEO, super smart, well-spoken guy, did a sort of let's inspire the troops meeting. And he kind of went a little patent, sort of, this is time of war. We've got to do all this. We need to, stay in the trenches. Don't go home until the job is done. And it just didn't land with the diverse remote, workforce. And this is somebody who communicates well in person. And in this Zoom all hands call that they were trying to inspire, the troops, he kind of went down a path that maybe if it had been everybody in an auditorium or if it was a smaller thing, there's like a way to do it. But, CEOs really have to understand where's the audience, how's the company doing, and what's the setting? because a one-on-one, different than a small group,
Right.
is different than
Right.
All hands or all hands via Zoom.
Yeah, and I think that that's how Megan and I have been able to kind of shine in our new jobs because we were conditioned for decades of speaking to a very particular audience. And I mean, we knew it was,
Through the
soccer
lens of a
moms
camera.
who ate church's chicken, who watched NASCAR. Like, this is your target. So you would get a story assigned and you would say, well, what message in this story resonates with that very specific demo? So to pull out these threads of a story that is going to land with that audience. So when I'm coaching, same thing, Megan, I'm sure you do the same thing, is we have to think about, the first question is, who's your audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you communicate that unique value to them?
Right.
And just having that conversation with people, like, I don't want to hear about your bona fides. I don't want to hear that you've worked 30 years in the finance industry. That doesn't help me
Nobody
at all.
cares. No.
Yeah.
How are you going to help me as the viewer?
Right. So that's, I hear exactly what you're saying, Walter. And I think it's exactly these CEOs who are incredibly smart in maybe very focused or certain areas, but then to communicate their value to a different or mass audience is a different skill set.
Mm-hmm. And I think what I see oftentimes as well is that sometimes what's being communicated is very complicated. So I've worked with some folks who have a 45-minute conversation with me, and we can whittle it down to a 1 minute and 30-second video because we all become so married to the information that feels so important to us when it's something that and you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, what needs to be communicated is much smaller. So I guess my question to you, Walter, is like, who's helping people learn that aspect of it? I mean, is it trial by fire essentially? Like, I would like to know how that works for these guys.
So it's a lot of trial by fire. In particular, a lot of and I'll speak broadly about technology companies because that's the world where I've spent the most time. But we have a bunch of CEOs who are not in tech, so it applies. But for technologists in particular, a lot of them are younger and they have technical sort of geeky backgrounds. And that's those skills that enable them to imagine and create amazing technology do not necessarily translate well to building and scaling a team that can execute. And so I had one of my CEOs had a very successful exit. They built a kind of specialty product that supported some Microsoft applications for the enterprise. It was a technical thing. It was a very technical guy who had worked in IT services, and I think he would say, "Yeah, I'm really more comfortable around code than I am talking to people."
Yeah,
but he ended up, and he was at an inflection point, and some investors and a partner found his company. The word of mouth was great, and he was able to negotiate a very successful exit for himself, and so he's kind of set for life, but he was always uncomfortable communicating the value, and so and this is super common in technology, and these people need help, and there's not any single place to get it.
Yeah, I can see, just because I'm operating more in the benefits industry now, and insurance and the carriers and all that kind of stuff, and I am amazed at the strategy that goes into everything that's being created. But the execution of communicating that strategy to the people who need to use that information is not there.
Well, and I think one of the challenges is that a lot of people in tech want the technology to speak for itself and do it all.
Yeah.
And I'll say there's a lot of skepticism. Like in politics, there's communications directors, there's positioning, there's spin, there's there's all, and that's just kind of an accepted part of the game. I think a lot of people, in technology are skeptical about how important communications is in their success, and also about bringing in people who have backgrounds like yourselves, right? Because it's interesting, even in the little intro and just the poise, the confidence, the positioning, you present differently than a typical tech podcast,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yes.
a little bit production values, but it's just there's
Presentation.
well, presentation, and there's a confidence, a willing to smile, willing to use humor, sort of being
Right.
relaxed, that is obviously something that you've been trained to do and practiced. And and in technology, I think there's people are learning to appreciate how important the storytelling aspect is to their success.
It is. It is. I'm sure when you're looking for investors, if you can't tell your story correctly, how are you selling your product? And you're right, they want the tech to speak for itself sometimes. I understand that. But I didn't think about it from the perspective of when you're speaking to your employees, you're also having to sell them on what they're building and why they should try hard and all these
Internal and external communication.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
I applied to those jobs.
Yeah. And one of the things that's, we just live in such an interesting time with, Sam Bankman-Fried going to go to jail for a long time because it turned out it was just a huge Ponzi scheme. And so, but he was a very effective for all his, he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt and
Sleeping on a beanbag in his office.
Beanbag. I mean,
He had that tech
there was a presentation. Oh, I'm too nerdy and too busy to care about any of these things. And I think that, and that happens. You remember the Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos. She she was enormously
She was on brand.
Sure was.
At being on brand, but forgot to bring the company along. And so that's something that tech struggles with is Elizabeth Holmes, or the guy who was the founder of WeWork, and created an amazing reality distortion field, got people thinking that this sort of real estate subleasing business was going to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars and change the world. And so there's both a respect for the reality distortion field that a great communicator can do, and also but it's dangerous, right? Because it can lead people astray, right?
Yeah, if you don't have the product to back it up.
Yeah, and it's because I don't think there's been a better business communicator in my lifetime than Steve Jobs, and his sense of theater and one more thing and presentation was just legendary. But you have people who've tried to take those lessons and they don't necessarily deliver the products to follow up.
It has to be authentic to them,
right,
too. You can't just imitate Steve Jobs.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You mentioned that. I always thought about sort of the like the garage band cover band, where they've got the hair and the hair and the tattoos and the everything, and they're just struggling, but they actually don't have the musical talent.
Right.
Of like, it's one thing to be Guns N' Roses and look wild, but have that incredible talent of Axl Rose and Slash and stuff like that. And it's another thing to say, wow, I really want to be like that, and I'm gonna do all the affectations, but my music is still ordinary.
It's Milli Vanilli all over again.
There you go.
Well, Walter, we're going to make this required watching for all of our journalism friends who are really trying hard to leave the business right now. I don't know if you're aware, but there has been a mass exodus of people leaving TV news, in particular newspapers. I think that happened a decade before it happened to us, but I think that a lot of us struggled with translating our skill set. So it's really helpful to hear those holes, which can translate into many different industries, which we, of course, have a particular skill set for.
I think that's exactly right. That good, clear storytelling for an internal or external audience is enormously, important, both in terms of communicating to customers and communicating, and really leading teams. So being able to do that, to communicate the way you've been trained to, is is enormously valuable. Now, figuring out exactly where to plug in, and I think the interesting question is, do people want to come in a pure communications role, or do they want to come in something that's closer to the heart of the business? Because there's communications, and then there's marketing, and
Right.
there's some different, and there's selling, and so there's some different aspects. But being able to understand an audience, tell a story, communicate persuasively, are things that businesses are always going to need that.
Mhm.
And authentically, as we mentioned earlier, because if there's one thing I think Aaron and I learned in our time in the business, inevitably we would have some sort of consultant come through Walter.
Yes.
Said consultant would say, I'll use an exact example for me, Megan, you need to be a little less Megan, right? Okay, that's my personality. I'm very using my hands, maybe it's the Greek, I don't know. But either way, so the next several times I went on the air, I tried to downplay myself, present the weather in a way that made them happy while they were in town. The second they left, I was like, I cannot do this. But I think that's something you realize when you've been on the air for a long time, when you've been using your words and your thoughts to communicate as your job, you have to do it in a way that feels good to you. And I think I would be curious of the CEO that was Patton that day.
Yeah.
Probably not necessarily a Patton-like person, but thought this is going to be a hell of an inspiration because I'm going full Patton on this, right?
I think that's exactly right, because I hadn't met him when I saw the the all hands thing that I was basically kind of brought in to try and help clean up, and I said, what's this guy really like? They're like, oh, he's the nicest guy. He's really thoughtful.
Really Mr. Rogers, not Patton.
Yeah, and but there's inspiring a team to achieve great things is no easy task.
Right.
And especially if there's a misfire, and pretty much all companies misfire, have to pivot, have to redo things, and how to and that's a huge thing, to say, okay, we're going to take a deep breath. This didn't work out the way we want to, and here's the direction we're going to go, and let's all pull in the same direction. Yeah, that is a very nuanced form of communication that is really effective, or really important for CEOs and business leaders, and the skills that you bring in particular, communicating over this medium, because we're not in face-to-face
anymore.
as much. And I think it's for people who have come from an on-screen background or on-air background, or communicating, it's like they've got a leg up, that if they can figure out how to use it. Because like, I literally, when COVID hit, I had basically done cell phone calls and emails, but I had not done this video. So I literally joined a networking organization called Lunch Club, where they set up kind of video chats for people in tech, and it's been great networking, and I wasn't going out anywhere. So I was like, well, I might as well talk to people. But part of my goal was to at least get to a point where I could have a conversation with two very poised professionals like you, and not be freaking out and saying, oh my God, is my forehead really that big? And why do I look so
Don't
pasty?
worry, because I worry about that all the time anyway. I'm like, oh man, do I go up or do I go down? Yes, that's inherent, I think, to everyone, Walter. But the question is, what do you do about it when you're live in that meeting?
Yeah.
Do you let yourself get sidetracked with your own visual and watching other people? And also, how do you read the room when you're in a meeting like that? Because you can, it's just, you've got to be real perceptive, I think.
Yes, and that's a dark art. I think there are a few masters, but the ones who are good at it are worth their weight in gold. And I think they'll come disproportionately from people with your backgrounds who have been communicating persuasively, and being nimble on their feet in front of the camera,
Mm-hmm.
for for a while now.
Well, Walter, you have arrived. You did a great job.
So good.
This was tons of fun. Yeah, this was great to talk it through. And I do think it is very valuable for people who are leaving our industry, wondering where they should go next and how to communicate again, how to market themselves to other industries.
Yeah, it's
Certainly.
critical.
All right. Well, thank you both so
Walter.
much. Great meeting you, and leave some way for people who see this, if they want help or they want advice, that they can reach out to me. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we'll put all your contact info in the video description. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Walter. Bye, Megan.
See you guys.
Bye.